Hi everyone, I'm Bartholomew Ryan, an assistant curator here at the Walker, and co-curator along with Darcy Alexander. Darcy, are you here? I need to locate you. No, not yet. Darcy Alexander of the International Pop exhibition. I mean, obviously this is a very exciting time for Darcy and I and the institution, and it's so great to have so many wonderful people even just sitting here today. There's numerous scholars here who aren't actually contributing to these talks or conversations, but your presence is very much appreciated. I also want to acknowledge an artist who is in the show but is not actually part of a program today. Sergio, are you here? Sergio Lombardo? Maybe he'll be here in a while, but he sat through the first panel. He has a wonderful John Fitzgerald Kennedy work that's in the pop politics section of the show. So one of the real privileges of the kind of research that Darcy and I were allowed to do on this exhibition, facilitated in part by the Andy Warhol Foundation, obviously, was to travel to places and connect with scholars and most especially artists there. I had the privilege some years ago of visiting Buenos Aires, where I met some fantastic curators and scholars, and I should give a shout out to Rodrigo Alonso and Inez Katzenstein and various others. But I also got to I had a lovely dinner with this gentleman over here, Eduardo Costa, and I had a studio visit with Delia Cancela. And I think that sort of really helped shape a lot of the thinking in relationship to how the Argentine section of the show developed. When you go there, you'll see a lot of very bright, appealing, almost sort of utopian at times seeming representations of identity and of sort of subjectivity. There's engagements with the fashion industry. There's work that points towards kind of a really radical developments in Argentina that occurred around the mid-60s related to media, art, and engagements with the media, how the media functions as both a producer of meaning, not just something that reflects it. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of the structure of this conversation today. María José Herrera, who is a wonderful scholar and is the director of the Museum of Tigre in Argentina, and has written a beautiful essay for our catalog, which will be out in a few weeks. I asked Maria if she could give us a sort of 10 or 15-minute talk, which sort of lays out some of the foundations of this period in Argentina, so that we can all have something of a lingua franca when it comes to the conversations with Eduardo and Delia. So after Maria's talk, we'll all just be joined in conversation, and we'll talk to Eduardo first, because I think the logic is you're 5 days older than Delia. Is that it? 5? 4, which apparently has been a bone of contention for many years. And then we'll talk to Delia, and then I really, we have various slides, and we're going to sort of be very conversational, but I really want us to go to questions and have sort of 20 minutes or something for that. I think it's really important. So we might cut short the conversation part if we have to. This is all obvious. This is what happens in any presentation, but I'm just outlining it. So without any further ado, Maria. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm really honored to be here in this exhibition, and I was part of this exhibition in a very special way, because I feel really that everybody appreciates my work, and I appreciate the work of the other colleagues. That is great. So, because my English is not that good, I will be reading, and please stop me if you can understand me. Okay. Let's see what is. So, and this is the cover of Primera Plana, a magazine in 1966. Primera Plana was a weekly publication, most sold by middle-class magazine, appeared the young, glamorous, and creative pop artist. They pop up to visibility. That was the idea. They suddenly appeared in a place where never been young art before. They seemed hedonistic, provocative, self-obsessed, and very comfortable in the world of mass media images. Their own bodies and fashion were part of a spectacle of youthful freedom. Fashion was fantasy and imaginative way to communicate and denounce the stereotypes of sexual identity, among other things. In the climate of the economic prosperity after World War II in Argentina, the desarrollismo, a political and economic project, helped to introduce a strong modernization. From the second half of the 50s, these policies resulted in the rise of a middle class, travel and superior communication, and an outstanding process of internationalization. The arts flourished and new institutions grew to accommodate the avant-garde art. In 1956, the Museum of Modern Art was created after the model of the MoMA, and new galleries bet on the experimental art of the youngsters. The young artists were in close contact with the emerging tendencies in European and American thought. The group was international in the language they used, though very local in their subjects and interests. An organization that played a significant role in the sense was the Instituto Torquato Di Tella, established in Buenos Aires in 1958. Unique in its type, was pioneer of corporate philanthropy. It was founded by the Siam Di Tella family, appliance and automotive business, and by contributions from the Ford and Rockefeller foundations. Devoted to the arts and the science, its well-attended gallery in Florida Street contained audiovisual, musical, and visual labs. By the middle of the decade, Di Tella was the place for the experimentation, and as a result of that, artists were encouraged to work together with theater, fashion, objects, electronic music, and social reflection on art. Directed by the critic Jorge Romero Brest, the Institute brought critics from abroad as a way of ensure the strict modernity and internationalism of its aesthetic criteria. Especially for the Di Tella Prize, whose financial reward was internationally important, those critics that visited Argentina were very influential agents in spreading that internationalism. Critics like Lawrence Alloway, Pierre Restany, among others, and their political agenda was include Latin America onto the world map. In the mid of the 60s, Pierre Restany, the critic of the French Nouveau Realism, was part of the Di Tella Prize jury in 1964, and described Buenos Aires as an urban setting where the, quote, physical and psychological conditions for cosmopolitanism were present. That was so due to the peculiar composition of the city, an amalgam of cultures brought together by large waves of immigrants from the 19th century that consolidated the launching of the consumer society in the 50s. The rapid succession of artistic trends and updating was common to Latin America's sphere, quote, simultaneous to what happened in other continents organized around a similar perception of the historical times, as Andrea Giunda proposed. A new humanism was born in Buenos Aires in the 60s, where multifaceted artists acted immersed in existentialist dilemmas and the frenzy of the urban daily life. They were painters, theater directors, designed fashion, spaces, and conducted happenings. They expressed something properly Argentine, the urban folklore in which they were immersed. This was what was called pop. A pop lunfardo is a lower class slang, as Restany baptized, pop lunfardo. In 1996, as I mentioned before, in the front page of this magazine, and in the magazine there was an article called Sociology of Pop, an article to explain and promote pop art. Some of the outstanding features of pop was the lack of a market for their short-lived gestural creations. The English critic Lawrence Alloway, also invited as a jury in the Tela Prize, commented that artists from around the globe are enveloped in the same aspect of a common culture. That is to say, in all the countries in which the economic, social, and political conditions were present for the emergence of a culture of masses. As Merchant McLuhan thought, the mere existence of television provided to different societies with similar ways of perceiving time and space. Pop as culture was common ground for the young in many world capitals, but doesn't mean that they all created pop art. Since it was so highly gestural, pop rapidly generated other options. But one of the impact of pop as a culture was, no doubt, to challenge many of the established values, art as a reflection of the highest moral, religious, and national values. And then, what was pop in Argentina? In Romero Brest's opinion, pop was characterized by, quote, the eternal present, the lack of repercussions for the future. An art that aimed to de-dramatize life by creating a space for humor and irony, and was a way of criticizing everyday life and its values. As it was said in the table before, the history of pop art was really written immediately in Argentina too. It's a lot of theories about pop by the main critics, Mazzotta and Romero Brest. Let's see. Many artists moved away from traditional genres, artistic disciplines, and patterns of craft, good taste, high moral subjects, and broadened perception by way of a new aesthetic experience. For instance, the Vivo Dito, this is Alberto Greco's attitude art. Buenos Aires in the 60s was a cultural focal point and promised, like the New York described by Susan Sontag, to be active, modern, manifestly international, uniquely vital. Artists such as Alberto Greco, Marta Minujín, and Rubén Santantonin worked together in a strongly vitalistic way. Edgardo Jiménez and married couple Dalila Pusovio and Carlos Skiru formed an almost inseparable trio, in which art and life blended with actions, performance, and daily life. The husband and wife duo Delia Cancela and Pablo Mesejian worked together both in art and fashion. Their interest lay in what was happening on the street, fashion design, movies, and television. They competed in innovation and visibility with peers engaged with media theory like Eduardo Costa, Raúl Escari, and Roberto Jacobi, among others, who experimented in an initial and pioneer stage of conceptual art for Argentina and Latin America as well. Critic Oscar Mazzotta was the hub of this specific kind of experimentation. So, the representative of pop. The main theories on pop were Romero Brest and Oscar Mazzotta. In their text, it is possible to distinguish three stages of pop. This is the theory. The first came out of Rafael Skiru, founder of the Museum of Modern Art, and Ugo Parpagnoli's development of a group of exhibitions called The Art of Things, a kind of proto-pop in the early 60s related to French Nouveau Realism. This kind of objectualism mixed surreal and existentialist content, like in these pieces by Pusovio called Shells, Cáscaras. The second stage of pop was closely associated to American pop and happened with Di Tella as a hub. As Romero Brest said, the pop is, quote, a recovery of the painted or sculpted image with an explicit content, for which no interpretation is needed. It deals with a clear writing of the signifiers that approaches objects as realities without the traditional idealistic impulses. For instance, the style of the poster panel painting, a very popular craft integrated to pop, and of course, the image of the mass media products and its strategies. Pop implied a change of context for various everyday objects, both individual and collective. It blurred the boundaries between what was public and what was private, between high and low culture. In turn, Oscar Mazzotta states that pop is a semantic art, quote, can be defined as a result of the conversion of the image into sign or as an appropriation of the sign by the image. In this way, both authors pointed out the conceptual influence, the mediatory role that pop art has on reality. They agree in thinking that pop is an art that emerges using already preformed materials, those provided by the mass media. In Mazzotta's opinion, this mediation is through language, the intrinsic structure by means of which the message is transferred in each medium. Pop is an art of the objects disguised by language. In his thinking, pop is not an art with social content. Rather, it exhibits the structure by which those contents are transmitted. In other words, pop shows the structure of media, and it already has a social nature. Mazzotta said, pop is a radical critique of an aesthetic culture based in subjectivity, where the individual is the center of all significance in the world. Oh, God. Instead, pop exhibits the image contaminated by discourse, which is collective, social. According to Mazzotta theory, Argentine pop was followed by another superior stage, the third, which consisted in trying to work with the actual substance of the media. Then a new genre was born after those theories, the art of the mass media. Then, And the art of mass media implied the transformation of pop into a form of conceptual art, an art that takes place in the midst of the media. That is the process that goes from the object to its dematerialization into ideas and actions. So I will just show some pictures. This is Mazzotta on the left and Romero Brest in the right. This is a Skiro work. He was working with this idea of criticizing the traditional values like religion in this case. And this is Broken Heart by Delia Cancela. It was part of an exhibition called The Death. And let's see. Corazón Destrozado, Broken Heart is a painting with attached objects, spoke humorously and candidly of disappointed loves, one of the little myths created by soap operas and magazines concerning female sensitivity. This is Revuélquese y Viva, Roll Around and Live. It's a Marta Minujín piece. It's a soft sculpture. The idea is rocking in these colorful strips of fabric structures brought to mind the experience of bouncing off a cotín, which is a bed in lunfardo, and in the era of the sexual revolution, inciting the audience to roll around and live was a provocative slogan. So 1966, the Tela Prize. This is one of the works. This is a new one, but it's based on the old one, which is a cake, a flag cake that a very well-known cook in Argentina. What's the name of her? Petrona C. de Gandulfo. She was a very popular cooker, and she invented this kind of very popular cakes. And Alfredo Arias made this big cake for the 1966 prize in the Tela. They were made in Cartapesta. And let's see, these are the pianos by Estopani. They were called kitsch, pop, and cam, the three categories of mass culture. Well, this is a photo of the people that in the theater, the part of a theater lab in the Tela. And this is one of the aspects of the work in the Telas Institute. Everybody was working at the same time in the same place. So this is Edgardo Jimenez scenography, and he was working also for movies, doing scenographies, and as a traditional painter. So I said pop is all over the place because visual artists were working in theater, and theater people was working with visual arts. And then the pop, the mass media experiments. Well, in this case, it's 1967 piece by Dalila Busovi. It is in the exhibition. And she produced these shoes. And this is in the Ditela and also in the stores in Florida Street. They were in sale. So it was like an intervention to everyday life with a very specific artistic object. And this is the poster panel, 1965, why they are so cool. And it's funny because it's an intervention in everyday life, of course, and in the streets. And they were not well known. So it's like an appropriation of a movie star character by them. So in the same year, 1965, the micro events were kind of proto-happenings. They were 15 minutes small pieces that were guided by a soundtrack made after singles in TV singles and radio transmission. So here you can see this is a rooster from the broth, the Nord-Suiza broth. And the other one is an astronaut, and after, behind the astronaut, there's a crush, the soda, orange soda. So, so the mass media were the subject and the object of this pop lunfardo. So, well, this is La Menezunda. That was the first piece that in the world, I think, that has a closed circuit, DB closed circuit. So people can go and see what is going on in the environment. So it's this kind of condition of the mass media that you could see and you could be seen by the mass media. This is another situation by the Menezunda. You can get into this room and be with makeup. You can be makeup. And this is the happening that never existed, which is the first work by the Art of the Media. And it consisted, let me see, just one second. They invented a false news and they transmitted into a different a newspaper, a magazine, but the happening never existed. But anyway, the mass media was transmitting the story, so they proved that the mass media has their own material, their own possibility of being creative, and also they can manipulate the minds of the society. So I call this part a pop art incident in the avant-garde politics, and this piece is 1965, a Leon Ferrari, and it is in the exhibition. And it refers to Vietnam War, and it was censored in the prize 1965 prize in Ditela, because Romero Brest said that maybe it could be the religious beliefs of the people of the institute would be wounded because of this. The name of the piece is in the name of the Western and Christian civilization. And the piece was removed from the exhibition before the inauguration. And apparently the sheer size of the civilization made it impossible to ignore. The body of Christ is the size of a child, and this made the empathic message even more humanitarian, realistic, and critical of the present current events. So the censored piece was not exhibited for Ditela Awards. It consisted of a standard store-bought plaster image of Christ, you can see that, designed to hang as a pendulum. It was a visceral critique of the violence carried out by the West under the banner of the dominant Christian civilization. From an art perspective, it was an assisted ready-made, suitable for neo-dada or pop art, but seen in context, the critique of institutions and political actions that it implied went beyond and continues to go beyond its relationship to any artistic movement. Romero Brest told the artist that his work wounded the religious sensibility of the staff, but Ferrari's critique wasn't pointed toward religion, it was the political use of religion he was attacking. The work unveiled the relationship between the ecclesiastic institution and power, the same ideology that had been at work in the colonization of Native America was being used to subdue the people of Vietnam. Ferrari later recalled, "I faced a dilemma. Either take the path of the arts, which indicated or demanded that I remove everything and denounce the censor, or the path of politics, in other words, my initial goal of exposing something precisely there about Vietnam in the place of the liberties proclaimed by the US bombers." So I'm out of time. Okay, so let me show you just the images here. This is Tucumán Arde. It was a collective experience based on that idea of the mass media being manipulating the minds. But this time in Tucumán Arte, there was not a false news, but the group of artists get together in Tucumán where the situation, the economical situation was really a crisis, a very terrible crisis. And then they use it, they intervene into the press saying this message like, doing an exhibition denouncing the situation of Tucumán, using that idea of the media can act as a cascade of information. In some way, they were pushing the mass media to denounce a real, concrete, and a political situation in 1968, the same year of the May. The Paris, the French May. This happened in Argentina. Was a political denounce against the system, and the change in the economy that brought some capitals from abroad instead of reinforcing the industry in Argentina. Okay, thank you.
Can I just come up with you? Yeah. Okay, so everyone's going to join me up here. Thank you so much, Maria. Maria was also a member of our Scholars Forum, so has really been on board with this project for a long time. I also want to introduce Laura Espondaburu, who is our interpreter today. Just basically, we'll jump in if there's any need to. I've got to get the clipper. Sorry. So one of the things about having both Delia Cancela and Eduardo Costa here is that they both have very interesting intersections as artists. You can see in the show the sort of the way in which they each engage the fashion industry, for example, and Delia, as well as being an artist, has a highly regarded history as a fashion designer, along with her late partner Pablo Messijan. And Eduardo, Delia also sort of emerged at a moment that would be sort of pretty identifiable with the Poplin Fardo that Maria was referring to earlier, a kind of a group of artists such as Delilah Pizovio, Charlie Scuru, and so on, who sort of were fairly happy to embrace a kind of a very deliberate pop dynamic, in a sense, whereas Eduardo would be more identified with a kind of perhaps a slightly different or even slightly later developing approach that sort of engages the media more sort of proactively. So that's a kind of a schematic way to talk about it. And we had a conversation yesterday, and all of my plans fell apart. So so basically, let's just start with you, Eduardo. You can see the images here in front, but
hello. Yes, it's there.
So, Eduardo, I'll just flip through the images. When you want me to move on to something else, let me know. But this is, I was hoping you could just open by talking about an art of the mass media, which was a manifesto authored by you, Roberto Jacobi, and Raul Ascari.
Well, this was 1965 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And we were a group of people. I was the oldest one, I was 25. And my friends were 4 years younger, the other two artists who collaborated with me in this work. And we had a mentor who was this guy, Oscar Mazota, who wasn't directly involved in the making of the art, but he was theoretically involved in some way. And he was the one who had really read McLuhan and who had a kind of extraordinary ability to teach that to us in a way, you know, to transmit certain notions that he thought were more interesting to us. Mm-hmm. One of our ideas, not with him, but coming in a way was stimulated or generated by him, was the idea that the media would transform reality in many ways, and I would say naturally and unavoidably transform them reality. I mean, offered to the wide audience a particular version of reality, and that was usually connected to the factors of power that would own the newspapers. So this was a way of introducing ideas and ideologies into the minds of the readers, who are not the interests of the readers are not the same interests of the owners of the papers or magazines. So that's the beginning of something that we decide to prove by giving the mass media a false report that the media were going to reproduce and transform and transmit. At that point, we thought of a relatively innocent subject, but anyway a disturbing one, which was happenings, a newer form of art that many thought suspicious of too much change or something. So what do you think of this?
I think it's great. So do you want to tell us what we're looking at in this image? Because that was really...
Yeah, this was, well, we had to show that we were, you know, young, active, full of life, and we loved dance and whatever. So we improvised like a certain an avant-garde dance in a private apartment, but we said it was part of a happening. That was one of the photographs. The other photographs are quite different, and they were photographed in other locations. But for the press, we told them that this whole thing happened in one place. So the press was immediately interested, and they gave us a lot of coverage. A week later, we told them that it was all a lie and it was an experiment to see how they would react. So there was particularly one person who reacted very well, one journalist who was became a friend, and he let us, I think it was like 3 months before, I mean after.
In October. It was in October.
We transmitted, we had a sociologist write on our experiment, and it was published in the same paper, and the audience of the paper was informed that this was not really a true happening, but something that we have made up to allow them to experiment how they could be, let's say, cheated by the mass media. So that was the work.
And that's, you know, a really canonical text now, Eduardo. How does it feel to have been part of that?
Well, this was, as somebody pointed out in the panel earlier today, a youth movement. You know, pop art was very much a young movement. As a matter of fact, when I was 25, I was already in New York, and I got to meet Warhol and all these people who were a bit older, but not really too much older. I mean, probably 8, 10 years older. And so it wasn't another generation. It was that, and they were the creators of pop.
Right.
We were, with this work, somehow beyond pop. I think it's probably a post-pop work.
And that's something, you know, Maria, that probably really distinguishes the Argentine context is this, you know, even Mazzotta as a theorist, after pop, we dematerialize this really rapid progression, or maybe that's the wrong word, but movement towards a much more dematerialized sort of relationship to art.
Yeah, in fact, Oscar Mazzotta wrote this idea of the dematerialization of the work of art at the same year than Lucille Part, the same year, 67.
Yeah, I think he was a bit earlier, because actually Lucy was in Buenos Aires in 1967, and she knew of this, you know, somehow. Or she didn't know, but she was there, and the ideas permeated the whole situation, so somehow she picked it up. And then she wrote her famous book. And once she said to me, I really didn't know that Mazzotta had written so explicitly about dematerialization, which is not a concept of Mazzotta. It actually comes from the Russians, from the, I think it's 19... you know, after the Russian Revolution, a few years later, that L. Lissitzky writes about what the new art was going to be like. And he said something like, the page of a magazine is going to become larger, like a poster, and that's going to be placed all over the city, and everybody will have access to that.
Well, actually, that's a fairly good segue. So this is you in New York.
This is me in New York in 1966. No, I'm sorry, 68.
And then, can you say why you moved to New York?
Well, I moved to New York because in 67 I have showed to Vogue magazine another work of mine, somehow related to the before, you know, to the earlier work that I just told you about. And I was, I took this prop that I had made, which was a year of gold, and I said that I had, you know, some other forms of the body, like fingers and toes, and a few strands of hair made of 24-karat gold. And I said to the editor that I wanted to show them this stuff to see what they thought of it, and they said, this is the most exciting thing we've seen in years and whatever, and we were completely supportive. And then I said, well, this is not real jewelry, this is like a prop for a photograph. And they agreed to take the photograph of this prop, and actually they had to present it to present the thing as a real thing. They couldn't not lie, because the magazine was made, and it still is, to sell fashion to people. So people have to know even where this could be bought.
So
and there was no place to buy this, because this was not jewelry. But it got the most attention anything can get in a fashion magazine, which is what they call a beauty shot. Doesn't have to have any writing on the page. And it's just something that they put there to somehow show the level of refinement and the special, you know, and new beauty they want to be associated with.
So Eduardo, so basically you made this ear and inserted it into Vogue through some
I presented it as jewelry. I said, listen, I think this is a very good kind of new jewelry, and they loved it. Right?
But all along, you were still testing these ideas that had emerged
Yes.
out of an art of the mass
And I
media
also said,
manifesto.
I don't think any woman needs to wear this or should wear this. And they said, well, don't worry about that. We take care of everything. And they looked for a model that was first Marina Schiano, a star model at the time, and they didn't like the way it looked. So they had Abeno photograph her the whole session, all the other things, you know, the fingers and everything. And then they decided they were going to try everything again with Marisa Berenson, who was the new star at the time. She was fresh from Europe. And she was the granddaughter of Schiaparelli, the great fashion creator in Paris, and the granddaughter of Bernard Berenson, the great writer on art. So she was exactly in the middle of the two worlds as well. So this was a fantastic confluence of, you know, art and fashion, but also, and probably even more, it was a work, a media art work, which very successful one, that is still producing images everywhere. You know, now it's more in our catalogs and so on, but it's still, you know, it's still flying.
One of the ongoing email conversations we've had for probably a few years now is what the edition size of this magazine was, because you know, there's like bulk circulation and official circulation. We dug up this old form that was completely, you know, you could barely read the text, because part of the conceit or the approach of this piece is actually, I think we settled on the edition size of Eduardo's work is 1.28 million. Which is rather generous of you.
No, listen, it was like, in the beginning they told me they had 3.5 million copies, or at least that's what I understood. Then it turns out 3.5 million could be the readership, could have been the readership, because they estimate like 6 people per copy in a home where they receive the magazine and they have it for 1 year, or at least 15, for 1 month until the next issue comes in. Then they throw it out. They put in the garbage the previous issue, and they put the new issue on the coffee table. And it tends to be there for a month, and everybody in the family or friends, whoever comes in, can go through it. So there is an estimated reading of 6 people per magazine.
Eduardo, is...
And that makes it really massive.
Yeah.
If there are 1,200,000 copies, for instance.
Right. And there's one of them here at the Walker.
One of them is at the Walker now, one of the real original ones, with the prop next to it.
Which I actually hand carried from Miami. I met Eduardo in South
there was an
Beach
international intrigue involved, and we could.
But Eduardo, so can you talk a little bit about your own relationship to the idea of pop? Then is this a work of pop? Or how is that related to it?
Everybody sees this by now as a pop work. Amazingly enough, a branch of this work was the fashion show poetry event, which is something we did I and my American artist friends did in New York 3 years later, kind of. In '69, we engaged Warhol and Oldenburg and Rosenquist and Marjorie Strider, wonderful artist, pop artist who is now in the show, has a wonderful piece. And
Eduardo, you were quite moved to see that work by Marjorie Strider in the show.
Because she was such a great friend. All these people were brought together by John Porrol, Hannah Wiener, and myself. And we did what was called the fashion show poetry event. And the fashions were by all these artists, you know, Warhol, Oldenburg, Rosenquist, Jim Rosenquist. You know, only Liechtenstein was not there, but all the main pop artists, which were almost all of them males. Okay. And then Marjorie Strider, who was a great pop artist, but she wasn't given the credit or the attention she deserved for decades, like 2 or 3 decades. And then in the end, right now, she was discovered, let's say, and she became kind of famous.
Eduardo,
And,
one thing that I was interested in that we talked about yesterday was here you are in Buenos Aires, part of a very vital generational group, you know, in which Delia also participated. And the next thing, you're in New York. And could you talk about that, the relationship between those different spaces, almost as mental spaces?
There were not different spaces because I wasn't coming from a country to another country or from one culture to another culture, but I was coming from one arm of the art world to another arm of the art world, thinking of the art world as an octopus. And then there always has been this ability for this almost something that you cannot refuse, which is to integrate and to discover a language in common with the artists of other countries and cultures. And here it was just fantastic how we blended. I mean, I blended another foreign artist, blended more and more. And this has been happening more and more because of globalization. But here it was the beginning. I mean, I'm the only one that is not an American.
Can you identify the people? What? Can you identify who's in this image?
Yeah. Well, first is Hannah Winner, a wonderful poet who wrote the famous, somehow, you know, it's always for an elite. But within this elite, she's a cult figure by now, and because she did this code poems, she called them, and they were poems written with a system of flags of the Marines. And so you had these different words spelled, and with flags, with the image of the flag. So it was perfectly in between visual arts and literature. So anyway, that was the first one. The second one is Scott Burton, who was a very good friend also, and he had written a little bit about art, but he started doing art with us, with this group. And then he became a major public artist that you may have heard of, Scott Burton.
There's some of his work in the Sculpture Garden, which you can check out later.
Okay. He had 10 great years of career, you know, fabulous. He went from a pothead to a famous artist, just like overnight, and started to have commissions and things, and for 10 years, it's a fantastic career. And then he died. Then there is Anne Waldman, who is still alive, and she's a major poet in the area of Colorado. She was teaching for years, and she's considered a referent, you know, as a cultural icon and so on. Vito Hannibal Acconci, whom you may have heard of, Vito Acconci. Bernadette Meyer, also a great poet, and then myself and John Perrault, who is still very active and doing a number of things, but he lives in Bellport now. He's kind of retired to the beach, to the seaside.
And I know you're working on a book about this project you did with John Perrault.
Yeah, well, this is Tape Poems, you can see the names over there. Right. Hannibal Acconci, Michael Benedict, Scott Burton, Ted Castle and Leandro Cas, Eduardo Costa, John Giorno, major poet also, Joseph Chirabolo, Dan Graham, Bernard Meyer, and John Perrault.
You know,
yes.
Well, one of the things, I'm going to move on now to Delia, and then we can circle back through questions. But I think one of the things that's fascinating, I wish we'd kept the image actually of you, Raul Ascari and Roberto Jacobi, just to see that group and then to see this other group that you engaged with in New York. You know, we talk a lot, Darcy and I, about sort of this being still, you know, an exhibition that is an international rather than global, but you see various sort of artistic exchanges, and I think particularly, actually, I mean, it happens with a lot of artists in the exhibition, but yourself and Delia really do sort of embody this ability to sort of travel and engage and sort of intersect with other artistic communities. Of course, the context in Argentina was there was a military dictatorship in power, and did that affect your decision to leave, or?
Not the first time I left, because I wanted to come here and I was interested in the things that were produced here, and I wanted to see them in the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody said earlier today, that most of pop art, the images traveled through the media to the different countries. The same happened there, but somehow the originality of what you do depends on how you read the information that is offered to you by the art schools and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's basic to see that information that you receive, other people are doing somewhere else, as something you should not do, which is what I did and the original people did. Mm. So it means many people read that and start doing the same thing that they see they are successful. And it's terrible, because for that information to get to them, like 10 years have to pass. So these people are really following on something that is already old when they see it and it looks new to them. And in doing that, they are procrastinating the chance to be themselves. They are castrating their own creativity, and they become derivative.
Well,
which is terrible.
What a statement.
This doesn't happen only internationally. It happens also inside the country, between the main cities in the country and the smaller cities.
okay.
So the way it's designed is going to necessarily affect negatively a large number of people,
Mm-hmm.
unless you react by your own tendency to rebelliousness, or because you are taught that is really what happens there, is that you're getting old information.
Okay.
And then you should look for the new information in you. It's better than to look for it in the magazines.
Well, that's a good point. I guess I wish to segue to Delia, would you like me to click through them, or would you like to?
Sorry.
Would you like me to go through them for you, or would you like to have the
No,
clicker?
no.
Okay. So I should say that Delia Cancela showed here 50 years ago, in 1964. Is that 51 years ago? So welcome back.
But I was very young. Very.
And Eduardo, you weren't in that show, unfortunately. You are of Argentina, but it was an incredible exhibition that was organized by a curator here, Jan van der Mark, under Martin Friedman, the director, and in dialogue with Jorge Romero Brest. So it was more of this example of the Ditela sort of internationalism and its kind of its sort of engagement with sort of other artistic agents and contexts. And the show actually, this is the catalog, it toured to 4 venues in the US, and I think it's sort of seen as a fairly significant exhibition within the Argentine context for the way it brought together a range of different artists, not all by any means identifiable or being identified with pop, but I think Delia, you were sort of certainly moving in that direction. But I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this work that's on display here. This was the work that was exhibited here at the Walker.
Yes, there were 2, no? Yes, two paintings,
Yeah.
2 collages.
This is the one that's reproduced in the catalog, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is this was done when I went out from art school. I think I was still in art school, and I went out and I meet all the people who were already in Argentina working. But my work was that I was preoccupied very much about the feminine condition in a country where machismo, the masculine force was very, very strong, where women, they don't have much possibilities. And then I start like this. First I had to, before I talk about that, I had to say, I had to fight with 2 things, my English and my memory. It's difficult for me.
Well, we can help you with your English, but I'm not sure about the memory. Yeah.
You are here to help me, but it's difficult. I was starting in that moment. I think I did it in '62. Mm-hmm. The work I was in '62, and you are from Argentina was in '64.
Yeah, and this is dated '63 up there.
Yeah. '63.
Yeah.
Well, you see.
Temptations. Las tentaciones del Señor.
Las tentaciones was called the temptation of Mr. X. As you can see, there are rubbers, feminine and masculine clothes. I start already to work without being conscious, maybe, I think. Start already to work with fashion, with clothes, and with the feminine image. Mm-hmm. Then after this, I don't know what. No, it doesn't pass into that. No, it was the well. Okay, is there nothing in the way I was thinking? It was right. Doesn't matter.
Sorry.
It doesn't matter. Well, I can talk about that also. This is much further. It's the one of the triptych was here. It's here. Sorry. We made this for the Premio Di Tela.
So
okay, we were working with couples. The idea of like we were living in a happy world.
Yeah.
We were showing our relation with nature, with idea of the icons. We were working a lot. I say we because I work with Pablo Mesejian. In the beginning, I was working the painting that María José showed of the heart. Is only myself, and the other one also was my work. And then after I met Pablo in art school, and finally we decided to marry. I didn't want to marry, but it was just what you had to do in that moment. We want to marry, but I say, okay, we are working together with the men. With a male, and we are going to work in the same label. And how we arrived to work in the same label, it was difficult. They were invite me to the Walker Art Center or other exhibitions, and we were fight because you are invited, I'm not invited, and we say, okay, we work together. Exactly in the same painting, and nobody is going to know, not even us sometimes, because sometimes I don't remember. People is not going to know who did what. The idea was we work together, we have the ideas, and then after, sometimes was him who was painting, sometimes was me, sometimes we paint together, and the thing was going like this.
So that's you're going to tell us now who did what, though, right? I mean,
sorry.
That's
If you're going to tell them, si le va a decir quién hizo qué cosa.
Una revelación.
You have
Revelation.
So, Delia, just
confession.
So everyone knows, I know everyone hasn't seen the show yet, but this is actually a giant triptych of works that really we should be showing the whole thing, but with the logistics we're just at a certain point. We would love to have given you the entire gallery, but I'm just really happy that we have this piece in the middle here. But there's something about this work when you see it in the gallery. It's so light. It's so to me, it has this amazing airy, sort of utopian feel. You can really capture this sense of like the possibility of popular culture, the idea of it as a mechanism to sort of potentially remake identity, break away from kind of socially conservative mores and reach for this new, more sort of egalitarian sense of self. And I'm not just talking here, I'm talking sort of partly about gender and various other things. And I hope, are you able to follow, Delia? Is it?
Yes.
But what I thought would be lovely is if you could read the manifesto.
Yes, that was because together with this, these paintings, we wrote a manifesto, which.
This is a later translation, so you can read along, but Delia is going to read in Spanish, which I think it's nice to get it recorded.
I hope I'm going to find it.
Maria, do you want to say a few words just while we're waiting about this piece?
Okay, now?
Well.
Okay, well, she's.
Yeah.
So, well, this manifesto is really interesting because it is a description of a new world, and as you mentioned, in which there will be more freedom and more open relation between men and women. And also because they are describing the different identities, sexual identities they are recognizing surrounding them. Because the last line, that it is originally in English, it said that they like girls, boys, boys, and boys.
Mm-hmm.
So different combinations between feminine and masculine. So they were talking about homosexuality, of course, but this is not a manifesto about gender.
You are seeing the manifesto in English. I'm going to read to you in Spanish. I was the original. We say, nosotros amamos los días de sol, las plantas, los Rolling Stones, las medias blancas, rosas y plateadas, a Sonia Cher, a Rita Tashingham y a Bob Dylan, las pieles, Saint Laurent y el Young Savage look, las canciones de moda, el campo, el celeste, el rosa, las camisas con flores, las camisas con rayas, que nos saquen fotos, los pelos, Alicia en el País de las Maravillas, los cuerpos tostados, las gorras de color, las caras blancas y los finales felices. El mar, bailar, las revistas, el cine, la Sibelina, Ringo y Antoine, las nubes, el negro, las ropas brillantes, las baby girls, las girl girls, las boy girls, los girl boys y los boy boys. You can say something very superficial. It's what was happening in that moment. It's a manifesto about what we love, but also what was happening in that moment. And in Argentina, like you say, in Argentina, to put this, to talk about this, was very difficult. And
so I think there's so much that can be said about this, to be honest. I think it's a really important text, and for me what's been fascinating about thinking about your work and the work of a number of artists in that section of the exhibition is to sort of think about the politics of representation as being very key to what you're doing. I think there's a tendency to see that sort of pop manifestations that was associated with Ditella as somewhat less sort of politically engaged and certainly possibly less radical than what happened later in the 60s with projects like Tucumanarda and so on. But are you conscious of, or do you feel that what you were doing, did it feel risky at the time? Was it just fun? Was it, yeah?
It was a mix.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she said, we were very young, We didn't want to conform. We didn't like categories. We want to be free to create. Before that, also that we start to work in fashion, because I have very clear that fashion is fashion and art is art. I don't like the idea of fashion and art and I don't understand that. We work in art, in fashion, as an artist. I was an artist when I was working in fashion, but I was working with the, how you say, los medios,
With the means?
Means of fashion. I was working, I was doing clothes, collections, exactly like you have to express yourself in fashion. But
So
myself, I was an artist. And I think that's for that I don't know if I answered to your...
I think so. I mean, could you tell us what we're looking at here, Delia?
Yes, this is, for example, from the beginning, we were working with the idea of fashion. This is experience from '68.
A major exhibition.
A major exhibition in Instituto de Tela, where the artists, instead of doing a work and show it and wait for a prize or something like that, we were invited and they give us the money to do something with that money. I was in experience. What we did here was a magazine. When I was little, very young, my father works as a distribuidor de diarios y revistas.
Distributed magazines
Distributed
and
magazines and newspapers. And then in my house, there were always un atado, a pack attached of magazines and newspapers. They were coming to the back of the house. For me, that was really like Alice in Wonderland. I was discovering a new world. For that, I also discovered fashion. And what we did here was a magazine. The idea, like I say here, was created, doing it, and then after, sell it.
At the exhibition?
At the exhibition, which was the process of a magazine. And the idea was, we did it, and we did an installation and a performance, because was a table, was the pack of the magazine, and one magazine in the stand showing, and the price of each magazine. And then what happened is we opened the magazine, and the magazine started to sell. When the 500 magazines they were sold, the work was finished. Okay.
And Maria, we were talking about that yesterday, because this was obviously, this is a very famous exhibition, partially because the work was censored, and then the other artists in protest destroyed their works. And so I was asking Delia if she joined that, but the response was no, we'd sold our work.
Also, I want to say is that it was not writing in the magazine. Mm-hmm. There were no words. It was a magazine of image. And what we say is it's not the important things, what we want to say, but the content of the magazine interests us. And there were fashion drawings. So,
and they were fashion drawings that you then went on to realize, or you were already realizing fashion in a lot at that point? Because
no, and that was the drawings.
Right, because I want to wrap it up soon so we can go to questions, because I'm sure a lot of people will have great questions for you. But could you just say a few words about you obviously left Buenos Aires also, and I know you spent some time in New York, but perhaps if you just talk about London and how you and Pablo then sort of really went all the way into fashion for a period. Yeah.
Okay, we start in Buenos Aires doing a show which is called Ropa con Riesgo.
Clothing with a risk? Or?
Yeah.
It was no risk. But for us. And then we started like that, and we understood in a moment that what we were proposing was not interest in Buenos Aires or in Argentina. We were very far from what was happening. Then we went to New York. From New York, we went to London. And in London was fantastic because we were coming from New York. They sent us from American Vogue to English Vogue, and we arrived to the office and we started to show our drawings. And what happened is there was a young fashion editor, which is there in the middle. It's
Grace Coddington.
It's Grace Coddington, and she said to us, "Come, if you stay 1 month, we are going to do a cover." And we say, of course, we stay 1 month. That was the cover is that one.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the first cover we did. And it's very interesting. I love the idea because to show the painting of the Shrimpton before.
Oh yeah, Jenny Shrimpton.
That one.
Yeah.
This is when we were working with the icons of fashion and music and cinema. We were making large paintings with the portraits, and was 67, and in 70 we made the cover with the same
with
the
same
real
model.
thing.
Yeah.
with the real thing.
Yeah, and your designs. It's interesting to relate them back to the work that's in the show. There's still this very. They have this almost dreamlike quality, like they're reaching for some kind of a world that's not yet ready for them. But,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. And there's so much more we could talk about, but I really want to put it out to questions for Delia and for Eduardo. But how long do we have, Misa? Would you say? Okay. So, is there anyone who has any questions or comments?
No question.
Hi.
Yes.
And oh yeah, we should wait for the microphones, of course.
Thank you so much. Kind of a revelation here about the dematerialization, for me, about the dematerialization aspect of what was going on in Buenos Aires so early on. It's interesting, and this is my perspective, I don't know how it is echoed by other people, but Argentina has always been kind of a land of mystery here, I guess partly because of the politics being repressive of news getting out, that I was not aware of sort of this. Could you speak, I guess, kind of the climate that would have produced this sort of avant-garde, very avant-garde conceptual situation that early on, and then what happened to it subsequently? Was this just a flare-up that happened, or did it develop into something that perhaps we haven't seen over here?
Is a question for anyone in particular or anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so
You want to take it, Eduardo?
It's for me.
Well, you can have it if you like.
Well, about the dematerialization first. The thing is that this mentor of ours discovered the notion of dematerialization, which was an early 60s concept first. And somehow we thought that when we were doing, instead of an artwork, we were putting together a few photographs and showing it to the press. Basically, it was a press kit, our work, and we were giving it to the press to do something with it, and the press would produce something. There was very little materiality there. You know, just a few photographs, whatever. So we, in a way, we started to see the dematerialization of the art object, which conceptualism here with people like Sol LeWitt and so on started to see also in their work.
Mm.
But the concept with that name was not going around yet. But they would do things like write in a piece of paper, draw on the wall 7-inch lines with such an inclination and such distance from each other, and that was a work. And they would sell it as a work, and it was really a few lines on a piece of paper, but the person who bought that piece of paper could build that in their wall at home if they wanted. Mm. And so they would have a mural painting. So what I think, of course, after the years passed about this is that really there was no dematerialization. Okay, try to get that because it's important. But there was a displacement of the materiality. The materiality was not anymore like in a room and you could show it to people, but it was going around in magazines or images that were dissolving into culture and being remembered by the audience in somehow being remembered or being forgotten, whatever. But at one point there was a huge audience who received that message. And then they deleted it or they kept it, you know, through the years or whatever, through the months, through the days.
Well,
now all that paper that was printed was the materiality of the work. It was a lot of paper, you know, that we were generating. Yeah. And so that's what I think also happened with conceptualism, because if somebody did actually the piece that was prescribed in this little piece of paper, which I know a pair of cases where it was done, this materiality that was generated before the work was done, you know, sometimes years later, was another thing, was something that had to be given probably a special name, and something like deferred materiality works with a with a postponed materiality, something.
Post dematerialization.
And it was another genre somehow.
Right. Well, actually, I might just ask Delia as well to echo Nick's question. What was it about that moment for you? Because there was a lot of vitality and there was some really tremendously talented people. What do you think created that moment in which you emerged as an artist? Like, do you have a sense of what?
In the 60s?
Yeah.
The 60s.
Itself.
There was becoming great everywhere at the same time.
Yes, I think it was an energy. I think it's quite. If you think was the war in the 40s, and then 50s, everything comes. Economically,
American art is supposed to start in the 50s,
yes,
with Pollock and so on.
It's normal that
things were starting
60.
everywhere.
Did you two know each other back in the day?
We were not.
We
so
were
close.
almost
we
together.
were aware of each other, but what happened is we left Buenos Aires at about the same time, and we returned at about the same time, 30 years or 25 years later. And
it's
when
true.
we returned, we became more friendly. She was in Paris, I was in New York, so we were not terribly in touch, but we visited a couple of times, and then we became friends.
And so now you're both back in Argentina?
Yeah.
And how is that?
For me, it's great. Really, I don't know.
For me,
it's great.
I'm not back, because I think when you live 30 years in other places, once you leave one place, you never back nowhere. For me,
yeah.
it's
So
not
you
back.
see, it's very personal. I mean,
yes, it's very personal.
It's not like I felt that I was very much in New York all those years as I was there. You know, I had all my friends, all my relationships, everything. for 8 years, I didn't go back to Buenos Aires. But then at one point, I wanted to go back. And I'd rather be there right now, no matter what happens, because it's not a matter of what government you get or anything. Being in a place has another depth.
Okay.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy in Buenos Aires, in my surrounded with my house, my workplace, my cats, my friends, and everything. But I have a life also somewhere else in France. I love to be in France.
And right now, we both love to be here. So
yeah, exactly, exactly.
That means something also.
I think is there anyone? Yes, sir. Should we just wait for the microphone if that's okay? Just because there's people all over the world live casting this as we speak, but don't be nervous about that.
I'll try not to. Just following up on the previous question, and this is for everybody, do you see, again, the situation in Argentina is quite complex, and the question I have is, do you see any kind of confluence between work that was being produced at the time and work that's perhaps being produced now? I think there's possibility of allegiances in the political situation and art right now that perhaps at the time were not present, and I don't know, it's not a specific question, but general for
Argentina
everybody.
is always complex.
Listen, I believe the world is always complex.
Yes, the world is always complex.
Right now, there are so many points of real strife and negative strife that are much more negative than Argentina in that sense, places of direct conflict, wars, whatever, that we are relatively privileged to be in a place where you can wake up every morning. I've been there for 12 years, and I haven't seen real violence or anything yet.
Well, also we should put that to Maria, because you're on the ground as a curator as well. So
regarding that question, the first one, because someone said that Argentina is like a land of mystery, because it's hard to explain why it's so modern and so on after so many coup d'etat and dictatorship. But I think one key thing is that until 1970, we used to have 93% of the population that could read and spell. That make a difference. We were highly educated, and we still have a university that is absolutely free and public. So we came from a very European model, like French model, and also we have a lot of richness in our country, like vegetables and production is very, very, very good. So I think this is part of the mystery of Argentina. We used to be a rich country in terms of geography and minery and everything. And then we have a highly educated population. And then when the whole situation of the world get better, like after the war, the modernization was something that was just there. And people was prepared to make the things and to accept those challenges, like to be international. So one other thing is like most of the people in Argentina have another language as a second language in school. So there's a lot of difference between Argentina and other Latin American countries. So it's not chauvinism what I'm saying, but it's different.
I'm conscious of time because I know we have another panel coming up in a while. I wish, to be honest, we could chat all day, but I guess we can all go out there and chat less formally. But it's just such a privilege to have you guys here, and thank you so much for making the trip. And yeah, thank you.
Well,
thank you.
Bob.